It only took 5 months, but we already have X-Men vs. X-Men in the newest era, as Cyclops and Rogue visit their old home and decide to fight each other.
Ready!
Ready!
Fight!
What do they call you? Wheels?
Hi everyone, it's Wheels here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking all about the very first From the Ashes crossover, Raid on Graymalkin, which takes place in the pages of X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. And wow, are there some interesting story choices. So if you want to keep up to date on what's happening in the X-Men universe, then join me as I break down the story for you. Now, before we jump into the main story, I do need to rewind a little bit and provide some context of how we've ended up in this situation. Go and check out my breakdowns of Uncanny X-Men issue 1 and X-Men issue 1 if you want to get a better understanding of the teams going into this crossover. And then make sure you come back and watch the rest of this video. So, Cyclops is leading an X-Men team in Alaska, based out of a Sentinel factory, and since the first issue, they have rescued some newly emerged mutants, beefed with the US government, found out that Cassandra Nova is back from the past and working with a villainous Team 3K, and in addition, Beast has discovered a new disease, RLDS, otherwise known as Resurrection-Linked Degenerative Syndrome. Magneto has this, which explains why he's currently old, in a wheelchair, and can no longer control his powers again. Oh, and just last issue, Beast got kidnapped by some Graymalkin Prison operatives. Now, with Rogue's Uncanny X-Men team in Louisiana, since the first issue, Nightcrawler and Jubilee have joined the team, the Outliers have been recruited and have started going to a human school. I know, wild decision. Rogue faced off against the Hag, the scary monster in the woods, who turns out is actually a former fling of Charles Xavier's called Sarah Gaunt. Rogue was almost killed by Sarah, but it turns out that Harvey X, the kid with the brain tumor from issue 1, was actually a super powerful telepath precognitive with a healing ability, and so gave that to Rogue so that she'd be able to survive and beat Sarah Gaunt. After that, Rogue left the Hag in the hands of Dr. Karina Ellis and the Graymalkin Prison, which was formerly the X-Mansion, and they established a truce, which lasted all of one day, as in the issue prior to this crossover, both Jubilee and Calico were ambushed and arrested by the Graymalkin Prison, which triggers this crossover. Did you get all that? Brilliant. We start with X-Men issue 8, written by Jed MacKay with art by Ryan Stegman, and the story opens with Beast waking up in a cell. As he comes to, the president of Terra Verde, a country that war criminal Beast massacred whilst creating a bioweapon, discusses the punishment that Hank should receive. It's important to remember that the war criminal Beast is dead, and that the Beast we have now is resurrected from a memory save file of 1985. So he has not done any of those criminal actions. Not that that changes anything though for the president or the main villain of this series, Dr. Karina Ellis, who welcomes Beast to the prison. We then go to Alaska, where Cyclops is informing the rest of his team that Beast is missing. Quentin Quire used his telepathic abilities to figure out that Beast is currently being held in the former X-Mansion, Graymalkin Prison, and Cyclops is ready to break him out.
Alright, this is it, people. Let's move. Let's go, 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 go.
Now, Psylocke questions whether it's a good idea to be rushing into such a situation, but Scott is motivated. He lost Hank once and he's not willing to do that again. And this makes even more sense when you consider the fact that Cyclops and Beast fell out in around 2009 during the Utopia era, and they never really made up again until now. Back to the prison, we see the other captured X-Men, Calico and Jubilee, having lunch, which is standard prison slop.
And here we go. I hope you're hungry for nothing.
And Calico would much rather have literally anything else. For reference, Calico, aka Becca Simone Panette, is the literal definition of a rich horse girl.
Daddy, I want another pony.
And so has no understanding of what prison is like. Jubilee notices Hank and calls him over, who, due to his resurrection, actually has never met Jubilee before. They get introductions out of the way and start bantering over the Alaskan versus Louisianan X-Men when Dr. Ellis shows up to ruin all the fun. She's here to let Beast know that he'll soon be sent to Terra Verde and executed for his crimes. In addition, Calico's family has given a sizable donation to the prison in return for Becca's release. All she needs to do is declare that she's not a mutant and she's free to go. But the teenager just continues to eat the mutant food with the other mutants because she is a mutant. This is a real big moment for her because up until very recently, Calico had been in complete denial about her mutant identity because her mother had brainwashed her into thinking that all mutants were goblins. Alice does not take the rejection well and orders a guard to beat Calico. Hank steps in to take the punch, goading the guard, who then continues to beat Hank to a pulp. And I mean, he's literally unconscious. But it's at that exact moment that the prison finds itself under attack from none other than the X-Men. And these X-Men have a plan. Quentin Quiet maintains aerial support and psychic communication. Magic provides a distraction by summoning demons from Limbo to attack. Juggernaut is at the edge of Salem Center preparing for a run. And Temper, Psylocke and Cyclops have all been teleported inside the mansion to rescue Beast. Oh, and there's no killing allowed, which is a far cry from last year versus Orcus, and as Magic says, is no fun. Once inside, Cyclops' trio run into a troop of guards and make light work of them. Psylocke reads the guards' minds to get a better understanding of the prison and is horrified. Mutants here aren't just prisoners, they are tortured, brainwashed, and turned into trustees, armed muscle for the prison. And almost like they were summoned, one of the trustees ambushes Cyclops. It's Blob. Now, Scott tries to reason with him. I mean, just over a year ago, Fred was the lead bartender at the Green Lagoon on Krakoa, and he'd renounced villainy. But it does not work. Before any fight can begin though, a certain Southern Belle touches Blob and knocks him out. It's Rogue and her Uncanny X-Men, who aren't very happy to see Cyclops at all. Why? Well, we then jump over to Uncanny X-Men issue 7, written by Gail Simone with art by Edgar Salazar and David Marquez. The book opens in the past, 1 hour ago, with Cyclops and Rogue at their specific bases on the phone, arguing.
Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise.
Rogue is very angry that two of her team have been kidnapped and so wants to go to New York to rescue them, as does Cyclops. However, Cyclops is asking the Uncanny X-Men team to stay home and leave the breaking out to his X-Men team, as he fears that getting any more mutants involved will only make this seem like an act of war and escalate everything, which obviously they all want to avoid. Rogue, of course, does not see it that way and wants to break out her team anyway, as she actually cares for a team in a way that Scott does not care about his team, apparently, and so just orders him to stay out of her way.
Nobody tells me what to do, ever.
Gambit, Wolverine, and Nightcrawler all prepare to leave, but the remaining outliers, Jitter, Ransom, and Deathstream, all want to come too, which Rogue just allows. Frankly, bringing 3 untrained new mutants on a mission is a crazy idea, but then again, Rogue does have a history of questionable lineups. Now, you might be wondering, how are the Louisianan X-Men getting to New York so quickly if they don't have an X-Jet? Well, that Eye of Agamotto that Gambit stole from a dragon in issue 1 just teleports them there, leaving Calico's horse, Ember, behind. Back at the former X-Mansion, Wood and Ellis escorts Jubilee and Calico through the underground system, who are both very angry at the brutalization of Beast. Jubilee is jailed and Calico is ordered to be released and dropped off anywhere. In true villain fashion, as long as Ellis gets her money, she doesn't care. So, Calico is taken to the gates to be freed, but instead of getting in the van as ordered, she just wants to walk, and Captain Ezra just lets her.
Oh!
Where did you lose him?
He got away.
Fucking idiot!
I get that he thinks that she is harmless, but whatever happens next is entirely his fault. Meanwhile, we see Cyclops, Psylocke, and Temper teleport into the mansion again, this time with added narration from Rogue about how she does have respect for Cyclops and thinks he's an incredible leader. But things are different now, so she can't trust him. Now, I can understand why Rogue would be angry at Cyclops and why she'd want to go and rescue her team members. But I just don't understand where this distrust of Cyclops is coming from.
My head, these images, what's happening to me?
There's been nothing since the start of this era to suggest they've had a falling out or anything. And I mean, just 3 years ago, they were good friends on the main X-Men team together. Confusing X-Men motives aside, the young mutant Becca decides to fight her fear and go back and rescue Jubilee and Beast, and so summons Ember, her horse, who is literally just in Louisiana, to her side in New York, appearing out of flame. So the real question is Ember a real horse, or is Ember the real mutant in this relationship? Reunited with her steed, Calico barrels through the prison's defences, and luckily enough, the Uncanny X-Men are nearby, and so follow the path of destruction into the mansion. Also, shout out to Jitter, who definitely has a crush on Calico, and I am 100% here for this young love. Whilst the rest of her team are making their way into the mansion, Jubilee is still stuck in a cell. But not for long, as in true Prison Break fashion, she disables her power inhibitor with a smuggled plastic fork and breaks free. And honestly, if an inhibitor collar can be broken by a mere plastic fork, then where has the budget gone?
Is maybe gonna work?
Hide the money, y'all! There's poor people around!
It's at this point that we finally catch up to the end of part 1, as Cyclops' team come face to face with Blob and are rescued by a very unhappy Rogue. Cyclops orders Rogue to leave now, but as usual, she is not going to follow his commands. Ransom is ready to rush them, but Logan holds him back and says he should only make a move if Cyclops puts his hand to his temple to fire an optic blast. The two teams square up against each other for the very first time, and Rogue declares that she'll just rescue her own team members and leave them to it, which I think is a fair compromise. However, this is an X-Men comic after all, and Dr. Ellis, who has been watching this entire time, decides to make everything just so much worse. She takes out Quentin Quiet with a sonic cannon and leaves the X-Men vulnerable to another psychic threat, scurvy. Yes, Ellis's mutant associate with telepathy is ordered to make them angry, and that's where things go terribly wrong. Cyclops signals to Juggernaut to start his run, but Ransom misreads that as him putting his hand to his visor, and so throws the first punch. And that's when the fighting starts. Temper versus Wolverine, Cyclops versus Ransom, and Jitter versus Psylocke. Rogue disapproves of Cyclops fighting kids, the ones she brought here, mind you, and so flies him away, with Nightcrawler teleporting Cannon out of the fight for fear that she might murder the young Sophia. Elsewhere in the hallways, Jubilee and Calico have reunited when they're greeted by some Graymalkin guards, the same guards who beat up Beast in part 1. Jubilee sees this as a great opportunity to get some revenge, but they are quickly dispatched by Beast himself, who has somehow also managed to escape captivity. As Warden Ellis is watching this all unfold, seeing the mutant scum get so confident, she orders all of the trustees to be released along with the Wolfpack Sentinels. Yes, the next generation of Sentinels are dog Sentinels. Going back to the X-Men infighting, it's Magic versus Deathstream, Gambit versus Temper, and Cyclops versus Rogue, who are continuing to argue. She's currently invulnerable due to Blob's powers, and so goads Cyclops into taking his shot. But he already has. Juggernaut arrives, tearing through the mansion walls and putting a temporary stop to the fighting. In the wreckage, they can all see the former Cerebro chamber, which is now home to the mysterious Prisoner X. Rogue wonders whether that's where they are holding Charles Xavier, and Juggernaut is willing to help free him. Cyclops, on the other hand, is not so sure whether they should free him at all. But before they can do anything about it, they are all confronted by Blob, Siren, Wildchild, and a whole host of Wolfpack Sentinels. And they're given a choice. Either they leave now, or never leave at all. Next, we go to X-Men issue 9, written by Jed MacKay with art by Ryan Stegman and Federico Vincentini. We open in the sub-levels of the Graymalkin Prison, which were formerly the Morlock tunnels. Now, don't worry, the Morlocks are still thriving under the leadership of Caliban and the Iraqi mutant Sobanar, as seen in the pages of NYX. This is where Nightcrawler and Psylocke have teleported to mid-fight, and suddenly they don't feel angry anymore.
Oh, I am calm. I am so calm.
Over in the control room, Warden Ellis is getting very unhappy because the X-Men remain free on her doorstep. She thinks that with the use of the trustee mutants and the Wolfpack Sentinels, they can all be apprehended, but frankly, she's just underestimating the X-Men. Philip Scurvy, who has been manipulating the X-Men's emotions, quietly reveals that he won't be able to continue doing that whilst also controlling the trustees.
When I lose control.
And Captain Ezra states, they are not just mutants, they're X-Men. And with Scurvy losing control over their emotions, the X-Men are unified, for once. Juggernaut fights Blob, whilst Logan takes on Wildchild, and Magic defeats Siren using actual magic, with everyone else tackling the Dog Sentinels. Temper drags Jubilee for being a Wolverine psychic, whilst Jubilee drags Temper right back for formerly dating Quentin Quire.
The library's about to be open!
Before they both get ambushed by more Dog Sentinels. The Outlier and Ransom rescues IDA, and they have a little meet-cute. Maybe there's a future romance on the cards for the two of them, and honestly, I'd prefer that to IDA and Quentin ever getting back together again. With the immediate threat defeated, the X-Men turn their attention back to their main priority, Inmate X. Warden Ellis, in a last-ditch attempt to stop them, orders Scurvy to enact the White Light Protocol, and when he tries to protest, she just slaps him. If he is a psychic rival to Charles Xavier, then he needs to prove it. Otherwise, Inmate X will be free. And that's bad? We then go back underground where the Blue Acrobat and the Purple Ninja are wandering the sub-levels where most of the prisoners are held, like Sebastian Shaw and Omega Red, who were arrested by Graymalkin Prison's other operatives, the Sentinels, as seen in the Sentinels miniseries. Psylocke suggests that they're on their own rescue mission now, and Nightcrawler jokes that it's probably not the best idea to break out known serial killer Omega Red, although he was reformed and working with X-Force on Krakoa. Canon clarifies that they need a monster of a different sort, and refers to Kurt as old friend, which throws him off because they aren't really friends. Actually, this is probably the longest interaction this duo have had, like, ever. The pair then stand in front of a massive door, a door that needs a key, Psylocke says. A key they now have because I am needed. More on that mysteriously acting Psylocke in a moment, as upstairs, Rogue and Cyclops seem to be getting on. They are all X-Men after all, and they agree that maybe they shouldn't be spending all of their time fighting each other. Finally, now that they have all of their people, including Siren and Wildchild, Rogue suggests that they free Charles and then they all get out of there. Simple, right? Except Cyclops says no. Under no circumstances will he allow Charles to be set free. Rogue questions this mentality, especially after seeing the conditions of the prison and how mutants are being treated here. Leaving a mutant behind is what Cyclops sees as mutant liberation? Yes, it is, apparently. Because as long as Charles Xavier is in jail, every other mutant is free. Cyclops feels that Xavier has manipulated the X-Men for the sake of his dream, and where has that gotten them besides misery, death, and destruction? So now, they are free to have dreams of their own. Scott is frankly traumatized from the events of the fall of the House of X, wherein Xavier worked with Nimrod and Omega Sentinel, the enemy, and he murdered the entire human crew of the Agnew, a ship that was intending to attack Nimrod. Something Cyclops saw with his very own eyes. And so, a new conflict has emerged between Rogue and Cyclops, whether Charles Xavier should be free or not. This definitely feels more real and less manufactured than the blind distrust Rogue had earlier in the crossover, but Cyclops being pro-mutant prison feels off. While I understand his point of view, this does not feel in character for someone who led the mutant revolution 10 years ago and publicly fought against the growing authoritarianism of S.H.I.E.L.D., even going so far as to fight off the Avengers. To leave a mutant, even Charles, to an organisation that openly hates mutants feels wrong. Before any more punches can be thrown, however, Scurvy introduces himself and tells the X-Men that none of them will be leaving. That's becoming a recurring theme, I guess. Logan questions who he is, and well, all this worry about Charles Xavier, and no one stopped to think about who to keep the most powerful sidekick locked down. And with that, he starts the White Light Protocol. This seems to be a telepathic bomb which begins to immediately incapacitate all of the X-Men, including Juggernaut, who should be protected against telepathy due to his magic helmet. In the panic, Kane takes a gamble and decides to break out Inmate X, believing that Charles Xavier will be the only thing that can save them. But before he can do that, he is stopped by Charles Xavier, who is not Inmate X at all, and was actually buried deep underground. That was who was talking to Nightcrawler, by the way, instead of Canon, and now he is free. Charles Xavier has risen from the ashes. Get it? And now we're at the final part of the Raid on Graymalkin crossover in Uncanny X-Men issue 8, written by Gail Simone with art by Javier Goron. We open with some history about Philip Scurvy and Dr. Karina Ellis, who met some time ago on her podcast. Yes, the main X-Men villain of this era is a podcaster. He was there to defend mutants and argue that they aren't all bad, and despite Ellis not liking mutants at all, she took a deep interest in Philip and wanted to know everything about him and his powers.
Tell me everything.
So, he told her how his power slowly eats away at him inside, but she pushed back on this and said it was a necessary sacrifice. Back then, Philip was more conventionally attractive, and he even had a romantic relationship with Karina. But over time, she stopped referring to him as Philip and started only calling him Scurvy. Clearly, Philip loved Ellis, but she just saw him as a means to an end, which is sad, but that's what you get when you date a bigot. And then we're back to the present, with Scurvy completely dominating the battlefield. The White Light Protocol has paralysed all the X-Men and left them floating in the air. Rogue is struggling to even think, but with her indomitable will, she pushes through the pain and heads straight towards the villain.
Oh, come on, give a gal a little credit.
Only for him to drop the Juggernaut right on top of her. Now it's time for the real matchup, Charles Xavier versus Philip Scurvy in a telepathic showdown. Face to face, Xavier asks whether they've ever met before. They haven't, but Scurvy has been aware of him for a very long time. Charles is confused because Cerebro should have sensed him, and Scurvy reveals that Charles is not one of a kind. And to that, you might think, what? A telepath? An almost Omega level telepath? An almost Omega level bold telepath? Well, apparently, Charles is an avian. No, not a bird. A very small subset of mutants who are incredibly powerful telepaths, and not like all the other very secret subset of mutants. There are 5 avians, or were 5 avians, as Harvey X, the young child telepath from Uncanny X-Men issue 1, died due to a brain tumour. And brain tumours are something that every avian has. So yes, the big shocking reveal is that Professor X is terminally ill and is going to die. Back to Rogue, Scurvy has become so distracted with his info dump on Charles that she's managed to break free of his mind control. And what does she do with her freedom? Well, she slaps the shit out of Cyclops. To wake him up too, of course. With both X-Men leaders clear-headed, they should really start to strategize on how to take out Scurvy and his telepathic bomb. But instead, Scott decides to bring up how Rogue brought kids to a battlefield. Which is a fair point, but is also a very common X-Men trope. Rogue defends her actions as the Outliers just wanted to rescue one of their own, and tries to deflect by bringing up Magneto being on Cyclops' team, as if this is a bad thing. Now, I need to pause here to discuss how wild this statement from Rogue really is.
such nonsense. I would never say that.
First of all, Magneto hasn't been considered a villain in over a decade. In fact, he's consistently been on an X-Men team since 2009, when he rejoined them during the Utopia era. On top of that, he was a member of the Krakoan and Iraqi government, and he was actually very good at his job. Charles Xavier, on the other hand, very recently murdered humans. Secondly, Rogue has literally been in a relationship with Max, way back in the original X-Men Legacy series, and they didn't end things on bad terms. He even proposed to her, so why has she got an issue with him now? And thirdly, if Anna Marie has such an issue with a former villain being on an X-Men team, then maybe she should look in the mirror and ask herself why she is leading an X-Men team of all people. This just feels so wildly out of character for Rogue. Moving on, they decide to split their attention. Cyclops will keep an eye on Charles, Rogue will keep an eye on Philip, and Magik and Wolverine are in charge of freeing everyone else. Scott also warns Rogue to keep an eye on their former mentor, as Charles isn't who they think he is. Meanwhile, on the astral plane, Scurvy jokes about the irony of the X-Men thinking that Charles is not who they thought he was, considering he's now this super secret special mutant. Though Xavier is getting tired of this, and so forces Scurvy out of all of the X-Men's minds, freeing them from his control. The telepathic battle isn't over yet though, with Charles trying to understand who Inmate X is while psychic punches are being thrown. Scurvy taunts him on how Charles can't feel him, but despite all that, Professor X is still winning. Aware of this, Ellis decides to take matters back into her own hands and storms into the chamber with a rifle and a squad of guards. The X-Men are unfazed, and Cyclops urges her to think about her actions, considering she is now facing off against two teams of X-Men, both of which aren't as nice as the Avengers. Rogue tries to defuse the situation by explaining how hard the X-Men can hit. This doesn't shock Dr. Ellis, whose own brother was killed by a mutant, apparently, which goes some way to explaining the pure hatred she feels towards mutants.
I hate your whining just as much as I hate you!
The big bad didn't come empty-handed, however, and has some tricks up her sleeve. The trustees, who she says will continue to expand, and Sarah Gorn, who would have murdered Rogue permanently if it wasn't for a surprise assist from Harvey X. At that moment, Charles Xavier finally defeats his fellow avian, Philip Scurvy, and the day seems pretty much won by the X-Men. But Dr. Ellis also threatens that she has a network of satellites equipped with sonic cannons aimed directly at the factory in Alaska and X-Haven in Louisiana, the X-Men's homes. In a stalemate like this, Ellis allows Jubilee and Beast to be freed, and that's it. No Siren, no Wild Child, and certainly no Charles Xavier. Rogue is willing to take the risk, but Charles wants to stay. He knows he's hurt innocent people and he's failed the X-Men, so he wants to atone for his sins. Magik teleports the X-Men out of there, but as they leave, Rogue and Cyclops clash again.
You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this.
Scott promises that they'll rescue everyone besides Charles, and Rogue doesn't take that. And they have to both be held back by their teams, and they go their separate ways. Great. Now the two X-Men teams hate each other more than ever before. And on a final note, we learn that the big gun that Dr. Ellis has is actually Inmate X, and he is the last avian. So who could this be? Well, at this point we know that the requirements for being an avian are telepathy and boldness, though that might be caused by the tumour. And we also know that Charles Xavier, Philip Scurvy and Harvey X are all members of the avians. I think Cassandra Nova is the fourth avian, considering she is Charles's twin. Out of the male telepaths left unaccounted for in this era, I think the fifth avian is either Nate Grey or Amal Farouk. Nate Grey is the ultra-powerful son of Cyclops and Jean Grey from the Age of Apocalypse universe, who has not been seen since he created his own pocket reality in 2019. Amal Farouk, on the other hand, is more commonly known as the Shadow King, Professor X's true nemesis, and the first evil mutant he ever fought. Whilst it's now been firmly established that Amal is a separate entity to the Shadow King, who possessed him for centuries, he is a powerful telepath himself, and has not been seen since the Krakoan era. I suppose it would be fitting if the fifth avian was someone so heavily connected to Charles Xavier. But if you have any other suggestions, let me know down below in the comments. Now, I'll keep this review pretty brief. This crossover felt heavily mandated and forced, and I'm still none the wiser as to why there's a conflict between Rogue and Cyclops. Sure, they now disagree over the imprisonment of Charles Xavier, but even that feels out of character for Scott. Surely he'd rather see Xavier be held accountable by his fellow mutants than by humans who are 100% torturing mutants. I will give credit where credit is due though, that there was equal opportunity for out of characterness for both Rogue and Cyclops in this crossover. No one was winning here. And frankly, this crossover could have been 2 issues, or better yet, an email. Uncanny X-Men felt like it was just rehashing things we'd already seen in the pages of X-Men. I also take issue with the fact that nothing has really changed. Rogue and Cyclops now definitely hate each other, and Charles is dying, but other than that, we couldn't have even rescued Siren or Wildchild and added some new characters to the rosters? But on a more positive note, the art was the true saving grace of this entire crossover, from the animated characters of Stegman to the beautiful faces of Marquez, the gritty realness of Salazar, the kinetic energy of Vincentino, and the dynamicness of Garon. Truly, the art team, they were the real highlight of Raid on Graymalkin. And whilst this all may seem like setup for the X-Men event X-Manhunt, which I will be covering in a future video, it really does not. And with that, we've reached the end of my breakdown and review of the X-Men crossover, Raid on Graymalkin. So what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Are you Team Cyclops or Team Rogue? And who do you think is Inmate X? Let me know down below in the comments, and I'll see you all in the next video.